The Young and the Restless spoilers. Big shock. Thursdays, May 1st. Diane's machinations. A dangerous game of deception and power. Diane Jenkins had always been a master of manipulation. Her life in Genoa City had been marked by intrigue, scheming, and cunning moves that kept everyone around her on edge. However, one thing that truly irked her was the growing closeness between her son, Kyle, and Claire. Diane was fiercely protective of Kyle, but not in the way a mother should be. Her protection wasn't born out of love, it was born out of a selfish desire to control the trajectory of his life. And now, with Claire moving into the Abbott family home, Diane could feel the walls closing in on her control. She couldn't allow Kyle to be distracted by someone she deemed unworthy. At first, Diane tried to maintain a facade of civility, forcing a smile whenever Claire was around, pretending to be the happy, accepting mother. But beneath the surface, she seethed with disdain. Every time Claire entered the room, Diane's smile became harder to maintain, her heart growing colder with each passing moment. She hated the idea of Claire being so close to her son, so close to the Abbott family. It wasn't just about Claire herself, it was about the fact that Diane's grip on Kyle was slipping, and that was something she couldn't allow. But Diane, ever the strategist, knew that simply pushing Claire away wouldn't work. Claire was too important to Kyle, and the more Diane pushed, the more she risked alienating him. So, instead of direct confrontation, Diane took a more subtle approach. She decided to play the long game, a game that involved Victor Newman, a man who was no stranger to manipulation and power plays. Diane knew that she couldn't achieve her goal on her own. She needed someone with power, someone who could help her manipulate the situation in her favor. And who better than Victor, the man who had always been a force to be reckoned with in Genoa City? Diane reached out to him, making sure that her proposal would catch his interest. She knew that if Victor was involved, the stakes would be raised, and her plan would have the weight of Newman Enterprises behind it. In her meeting with Victor, Diane laid out her plan with cold precision. "I don't like Claire," she admitted bluntly, her voice icy. "But I have no choice but to let her stay here for now. Kyle is determined to make this work, but it's only a matter of time before he realizes she's not the right fit for him. I need your help to make sure she leaves, Victor. She must return to the Newman family. It's the only way Kyle will understand that she's not the one for him." Victor listened carefully, his eyes glinting with amusement as Diane spoke. He knew exactly how to play her, how to use her desires and insecurities to his advantage. But he also knew that this wasn't just about helping Diane, this was about using the situation to create chaos in the Abbott family. Victor had his own plans, and Diane's desire to rid herself of Claire was the perfect opening. With a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, Victor agreed to Diane's request. "I'll help you, Diane," he said smoothly. "But I want something in return. After all, I don't do favors without something in it for me." He leaned in slightly, his tone darkening. "I'll make sure Claire goes back to the Newman family, and in doing so, I'll ensure that Kyle believes it's for his own good. But, when the time comes, Diane, I will make sure Kyle understands that you were the mastermind behind all of this. I'll make him see you as the one pulling the strings." Diane's eyes narrowed, but she understood what Victor was saying. She would get what she wanted. Claire gone, but it would come at a price. The fallout from Victor's plan would be devastating, but Diane was willing to accept that in order to secure her hold over Kyle. She had no doubt that once Kyle learned the truth about his mother's involvement, he would turn against her. But what mattered was that Claire would be out of the picture, and Diane would remain in control. Victor's smile grew wider as he watched Diane process his words. He was playing a dangerous game, and he knew it. But it was one he had mastered over the years. By the time he was finished with this, the Abbott family would be in chaos, and Kyle and Claire's relationship would be nothing more than a distant memory. As Diane left the meeting with Victor, she couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. Her plan was set in motion, and with Victor's help, she was one step closer to getting what she wanted. She would ensure that Claire left Kyle's life, and in doing so, she would regain the power she had been losing. But little did Diane know, the true cost of her actions would soon become clear, and it would be a price far greater than she had anticipated. Kyle and Claire's relationship, however, wasn't something Diane or even Victor could easily manipulate. The more they tried to pull the strings, the more they risked alienating the couple, who, despite the turmoil, were starting to bond in a way neither of them had expected. In their youth and defiance, Kyle and Claire had found something real, something that neither Diane nor Victor could easily break. When it came to matters of the heart, the more you pushed, the more people dug in their heels. And Kyle and Claire's love, though complicated, had already begun to grow beyond the reach of Diane's calculated plans. Even if they were young, their bond had formed in defiance of the forces trying to tear them apart. So, how would Kyle and Claire's story unfold? The answer wasn't clear, but one thing was certain: the manipulations of Diane and Victor would not go unnoticed forever. In the end, Kyle and Claire's love would either strengthen or break under the pressure of those trying to control their destiny. But, as history has shown, when young lovers are forced apart, they often find their own way back to each other, no matter how hard the world tries to pull them apart. And as for Diane and Victor? They would soon learn that even the most calculated plans have a way of unraveling, especially when the hearts of the young are involved. Kyle's revelation. The ultimate betrayal. Kyle Abbott had always trusted his mother, Diane. For years, despite the tumultuous history she had with the Abbott family and the lingering suspicions from others, Kyle had always stood by her. He had seen the softer side of Diane, the one that only a son could understand. But as time went on, he started to notice the cracks in her facade, the manipulations, the subtle nudges she gave him to steer him in certain directions, and, most recently, her animosity toward Claire. When Diane had told him that Claire wasn't right for him, Kyle had tried to brush it off as a mother's overprotectiveness. But the more he thought about it, the more it didn't sit right with him. Claire was a part of his life now, she was his choice, and yet Diane couldn't accept that. This didn't just feel like a mother's concern for her son, it felt like something deeper, more sinister. Something that Kyle couldn't ignore. The more Kyle thought about it, the more the doubts grew. He couldn't understand why Diane hated Claire so much. There had been no history, no real reason for such vitriol. So why was she so hell-bent on pushing Claire out of his life? What was really going on? Determined to get to the bottom of it, Kyle decided to investigate. He knew his mother well enough to understand that she never acted without a reason, no matter how convoluted that reason might be. What he found would turn his world upside down. Kyle dug deeper, connecting the dots between Diane and Victor Newman, someone whose manipulations were infamous throughout Genoa City. As he uncovered their dealings, his blood ran cold. Diane had been conspiring with Victor, the very man who had orchestrated so many power plays in the city. She had been working behind his back, pulling strings, manipulating the situation with Claire, and creating a wedge between him and the people he cared about, all in the name of control. Kyle's heart raced as he read through the information. The shock and disbelief gripped him as he realized the full extent of Diane's betrayal. She hadn't just been against Claire, she had been actively working to ruin everything he had worked so hard to build. She had used him, manipulated him into thinking her actions were for his own good when in reality, it was all about her own power and control. He stormed into the living room, confronting his mother with the evidence. "How could you, Mom? How could you betray me like this? I trusted you." His voice shook with anger and disbelief. "And Claire, why? Why did you have to destroy that too?" Diane's expression remained unreadable as Kyle threw the papers in front of her, the weight of her actions staring back at her. She could see the rage and hurt in Kyle's eyes, and for the first time, she knew she was losing him. She had never been afraid of much in her life, but the thought of Kyle turning against her. The one person she had always tried to control and protect in her own twisted way, was a loss she hadn't prepared for. She tried to remain calm, even as Kyle's fury burned through the room. "Kyle, you don't understand," she said, her voice laced with a hint of defensiveness. I did it because I know what's best for you. Claire is a distraction. You have to see that. She's not the one for you. I was just trying to protect you from making a mistake. Kyle's face twisted with disgust. Protect me? You've been tearing my life apart for months. You've been using me as a pawn in your game with Victor. This wasn't about me, it was about you, about keeping control. You never wanted me to make my own decisions, did you, Mom? You just wanted me to follow your rules, and anyone who didn't fit into your perfect little world was an enemy. Diane's heart dropped as Kyle's words sank in. She had always believed she was doing what was best for him, that keeping him close, keeping him under her control, was the only way to protect him. But now, looking at the fury and hurt in his eyes, she saw the truth. She had pushed him too far, manipulated him one too many times. But she wasn't ready to admit defeat. Not yet. You don't get it, Kyle, she said, her voice softer now, but still tinged with that underlying edge of desperation. I did all of this because I love you. I wanted to make sure you never got hurt. I know you think I've made mistakes, but everything I did for you. Kyle shook his head, his eyes narrowing with anger. No, you didn't. You did it for yourself. And now look at where we are. Look at what you've done to our family. I can't believe I didn't see it before. You used Victor to do your dirty work, and you didn't care who got hurt in the process. I'm not going to let you do this to me anymore. Diane's world was crashing down around her, and she could feel the walls closing in. Kyle was no longer the boy who had blindly followed her every word. He had seen through her manipulations, and now, he was turning against her in the most painful way. You don't understand, Kyle. You don't understand what I was trying to protect you from, Diane said, her voice trembling. I didn't want you to make the same mistakes I made. I wanted to keep you safe, to keep you in control. Kyle's face hardened, and for the first time, Diane saw a coldness in his eyes that she had never seen before. No, Mom. You wanted control. And now, you've lost it. You've lost me, and you've lost everything. With that, Kyle turned and walked out of the room, leaving Diane standing there, broken and defeated. As Kyle left, he knew one thing for sure, he would never forgive his mother for what she had done. The betrayal cut too deep, and the realization that she had never truly cared for his happiness, only for her own power, was too much to bear. Meanwhile, Victor, ever the opportunist, smiled to himself as he watched the fallout unfold. His plan had worked perfectly. Diane was no longer in control, and Kyle was now driven by his own fury. The Abbott family was in chaos, and Victor had once again achieved his goal. Diane had been the pawn, and now, she had lost her grip on the very thing she had sought to control. The question now was, how would Kyle and Claire navigate this fractured world that Diane had created? Would they find their way back to each other, or was their relationship destined to fall apart under the weight of the lies and betrayals? Only time would tell, but one thing was clear, Diane's manipulation had destroyed the very thing she cared about most. And in the end, it would be her own actions that drove her son further away. Nikki Newman had grown tired of the way Victor controlled every aspect of the lives around him, particularly when it came to Kyle and Claire's relationship. For years, she had allowed Victor to dominate their world, silently tolerating his influence over their children's lives, their business dealings, and even their relationships. But something had shifted within her. Nikki had always been a strong woman, and now, more than ever, she felt the need to assert her independence, especially when it came to Claire. Claire was her own person. She was not a pawn to be moved around at Victor's whim, no matter how powerful he was or how much he wanted to control her decisions. Nikki knew that Claire had the right to make her own choices when it came to love and relationships, but Victor, as always, had a different opinion. And it wasn't just about Claire. It was about who she chose to be with. Kyle Abbott, as the son of Jack Abbott, was anathema to Victor. He couldn't and wouldn't accept him as a suitable match for Claire, not because of who Kyle was as a person, but because of his bloodline. Kyle's connection to the Abbott family, Victor's longtime rivals, was a source of great disdain for him. To Victor, the Abbott name was a constant reminder of everything he'd fought against in the business world. And when it came to Claire, Victor believed that no matter how much he tried to distance himself from personal biases, his views on family and loyalty would always come first. It didn't matter if Kyle was the perfect partner for Claire in every other sense. The fact that Kyle was an Abbott made him the enemy in Victor's eyes, and nothing would change that. Nikki had long been frustrated by Victor's refusal to let Claire live her own life. It wasn't just about Kyle. It was about Claire's autonomy. Claire was a smart, capable woman who deserved the freedom to choose who she loved without interference. Nikki understood all too well what it was like to be controlled, to have her choices made for her. She wouldn't stand by and watch Claire suffer the same fate. "I've had enough, Victor," Nikki said one evening as they sat in their living room. Her tone was calm but resolute, an undercurrent of frustration lacing every word. "I'm tired of you trying to control everything, especially when it comes to Claire and Kyle." Victor looked at her with that trademark smirk, the one that always made her feel like he thought he had the world figured out. "Nikki, you don't understand," he said, his voice smooth and dismissive. "Kyle Abbott is not the right man for Claire. It's not just about him, it's about the principle. He's part of the Abbott family. Do you really want Claire to be involved with someone like him?" Nikki's patience began to wear thin. She had spent years tolerating Victor's obsession with control, but now, it was Claire she was defending, and she couldn't let Victor continue down this destructive path. "I understand perfectly," she retorted. "You don't like Kyle because of his last name, Victor. But that's not the reason Claire is with him. She's with him because she wants to be. And that should be enough." Victor's eyes narrowed, and his posture stiffened. "I don't care what Claire wants. She's young, she's naive. Kyle Abbott will use her, and when it's all over, she'll be left with nothing. And I will never let that happen. You may be blind to it, Nikki, but I'm not." Nikki was taken aback by the harshness in his words. She had never seen him so determined to undermine a relationship before. "You think Claire is incapable of making her own decisions?" she asked, her voice trembling with disbelief. "She is her own person, Victor. She can choose who she loves, and she has the right to make that choice without you breathing down her neck." Victor scoffed, his tone condescending. "You're too emotionally involved, Nikki. You're not seeing the bigger picture here. I'm doing this for her. I'm doing this because I know what's best for her." Nikki clenched her fists in frustration. She had heard this before. Victor's justification for every decision, every manipulation, was always that he knew best. But she was done with that. She was done watching him control everything, including Claire's future. "You don't get it, Victor," she said, her voice steady now. "This isn't about you. It's about Claire's happiness. If she's happy with Kyle, you need to accept that. You don't get to decide who she loves. That's her choice, and it's time you respected that." Victor's face hardened. "You're wrong, Nikki. I'll never respect that. Kyle Abbott is not good enough for her, and I won't stand by and watch her make a mistake." Nikki's eyes flashed with determination. "You've gone too far this time. You've always thought you could control everyone, but you're not going to control Claire. Not this time. She deserves better than that." But no matter how much she tried to reason with him, she knew that Victor was unyielding in his beliefs. His hatred for the Abbott family, and his unwillingness to accept Claire's choices, would only lead to further conflict. It was clear to Nikki that nothing would change Victor's mind, not now, not ever. The situation only worsened when Victor received news that Claire and Kyle had decided to live together. The decision, which should have been a simple and joyous step for any couple, only fueled Victor's anger and frustration. To him, this was the ultimate act of defiance, a sign that Claire was choosing Kyle over everything he had tried to control. Victor's reaction was explosive. He raged at anyone who would listen, blaming Kyle, blaming Claire, and of course, blaming Nikki for not stopping it. He couldn't comprehend how Claire, his own daughter, could make such a decision without considering his feelings. And then there was Victoria, always ready to stir the pot. She had her own issues with Cole Howard, and her grudge against him was something that would undoubtedly add fuel to the fire. The situation in the Newman family was tense, to say the least, and the cracks in their foundation were becoming more and more apparent. For Nikki, this was the final straw. She had tried to reason with Victor, tried to make him see that Claire was an adult capable of making her own decisions, but Victor's unrelenting control had pushed them all to the brink. Nikki knew that if things didn't change soon, the damage would be irreversible. Victor had won this battle. But Nikki wouldn't back down. She couldn't. She would fight for Claire's right to live her life on her own terms, even if it meant going against the man she had once loved. The war between them was just beginning, and the stakes had never been higher. As for Kyle and Claire, their love was being tested in ways they never anticipated. The pressure from both families was mounting, but the question remained. Would they choose to fight for each other, or would the weight of their family's expectations tear them apart? Only time would tell, but one thing was certain: Victor Newman would never let go of his grip on control without a fight.